Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Alrighty, hello everybody, and good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're calling in from. Thank you for joining us for today's Exit Solutions Alliance webinar call. My name is Drew English. I'm the program coordinator here at the Exit Planning Institute, and I'm with Kyle Madden today from KLH Capital. And he's going to be talking to us today about introduction to private equity and really defining family successions. Before I turn it over to Kyle, a few things. First off, the webinar call is being recorded. The recording will be available to you after the call, so just look for an email from me. I'll be sending the link to you to download that recording. Second, we always encourage interaction and questions and comments. Therefore, you can type your questions in the question box, which is located in the drop-down menu of GoToWebinar. So please go ahead and type anything in there during the presentation, and I can facilitate those over to Kyle throughout. And then with that, Kyle Madden being our speaker here, he's a partner with KLH Capital and is primarily responsible for identifying, structuring, and executing transactions, due diligence, and portfolio management. Kyle is also part of our SEPA faculty. During our SEPA week, if anyone on the call is a SEPA, he teaches part of the private equity section of the exit options analysis. And so he's familiar with us. We're familiar with him. We're really excited for today's call. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Kyle and we can get going for today. So Kyle, it's all yours.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Drew. And hello, everybody. Good afternoon or good morning. This is Kyle Madden. Today I'm in Tampa Bay, or in Tampa, Florida. And we're here to talk about generational transfers or succession planning amongst these family-owned businesses that frankly we all work with, and how and why private equity, particularly lower middle market private equity, can play a role in those types of transactions or these types of transactions. So that is today's topic, and we will dive in. Before we really get going, in a lot of these webinars, we have shown a case study video. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties on our end right now. So Drew has just emailed all of you guys a link to our video case study today. So when we get to it, I'll actually go on pause here. You guys can flip over into your inbox, click that link, watch the video. It's not longer than 3 or 4.5 minutes, something like that, and then come back to the actual GoToWebinar, and we'll talk about that case study. So little bit of patience here, but bear with us. So as Drew began to explain, my name's Kyle Madden. I'm a partner here with KLH Capital. We're headquartered here in Tampa, Florida. I grew up in Amherst, New Hampshire, in southern New Hampshire. My day job is really working with business owners and advisors such as yourselves as it relates to different situations and different ownership goals and objectives as it relates to how KLH can help you guys. So we'll facilitate recapitalizations, management-led buyouts, and generational transfers, which is obviously what we're here to discuss today. I sit on the board of directors to a couple of our different portfolio companies. Went to school down here in Tampa, and when I'm not in the office, I try and spend my time out on our boat and fishing off that boat, or snow skiing and sailing. And I'm certainly married to my wife, Christine, about 15 months now, which is great. So this is our team at KLH. We've got 5 partners. I'm one of them. James, Will, Chris, Josh, and myself make up the firm's investment committee. And then we're rounded out by our 2 founding partners off to the right, John and Jeff, and portfolio management team underneath us partners, Michael, Graham, Jimbo, Jesse, and Ron, handles a lot of our marketing and outbound origination. So we put this here because I think a couple webinars ago, we realized, wait a second, I'm spending time talking about our firm, but I don't know that you guys can necessarily see our firm. So this is who we are, and happy to meet you guys. So a little bit about the firm here. I mentioned that we're down in Tampa Bay. We manage about $320 million of assets under management. That is split between 3 different funds, one with a vintage of 2005. We raised another fund in 2011, and we've subsequently raised a 3rd fund about 2 years ago, which is our most active fund of $155 million. You'll see that a couple bullet points down. So we've been doing this since the mid 80s. We have worked with, this slide states 130, but we're up to about 150 different families and management teams all across the country. A lot of success, some failures, but we've seen a lot here, and we've done a lot of these transactions. I think what really matters here is the pie charts across the bottom. We were founded to and focus exclusively on working with family and privately owned businesses with an average of, say, about $25 million of revenue. And all of the businesses that we partner with have never had any sort of private equity or institutional investor or partner before. So we view ourselves as good at bringing, I'll almost use the term bedside manners, to these family-owned businesses, because they can be a lot bigger, better, faster, stronger, but it takes a certain skill set and, frankly, personality, as you guys know, to be able to work with these families. So there's a couple different strategies within private equity. We'll talk about this in the coming slides, but we are very accustomed to working with the problems and likewise successes of these smaller family-owned business. When you look at our portfolio, each business that we partner with is entirely different and standalone, with different family and management goals and objectives, pain points, and as I mentioned, prior successes and current challenges. So we exist really to partner with the current owners and the management teams when they're looking to, not only cash a big check, but accomplish something bigger, right? The money these days is almost the easy part. It's almost a commodity for that matter, but we're looking for situations, and we get calls by you guys when, sure, money's important, but they also want to accomplish something else beyond just money, either organizing the business so the boss can physically retire, spreading ownership to different key employees or family members, transitioning ownership to the next generation of family, which is what we'll get into today. And then lastly, growing and just generally professionalizing the business at a rate that they cannot do by themselves. And Drew and I were just talking about a situation where we have just exited an investment, but we took this business just a couple short years ago, about 4 years ago, and we grew the bottom line about 3 times the size via both organic growth and doing acquisitions. And we just exited this past Tuesday, and it's one of these situations where the founding shareholder cashed a very large size check 3 or 4 years ago. Just this past Tuesday, his rollover equity, he got a check for more than the initial dollar amount that he received years ago. So that was great. And then lastly, the management team that we cut into that business, it was the management team all along, but they weren't owners. We made them owners and we gifted them equity, and now they all literally and individually are have millions of dollars in their pockets. So it was a great win. But these are the types of situations that KLH gets involved with. So today, we'll start with understanding private equity and how private equity groups work with companies. If you guys have seen these webinars before, this may become redundant. But for those of you who are new, this will be almost like a private equity 101, introduction to private equity, so you can see the inner workings of how the private equity business really works. And then we'll move into the basic mechanics of a generational transfer or a family succession deal, its benefits. And then lastly, we've got a case study in there, of course, and then we'll work on identifying when the owner or company is a candidate for a family succession deal or opportunity. It's very important for you guys to understand what to be listening for, what to hear, and what we hear, so you can transition it correctly. So we'll kick off on what is private equity. So it really starts with a thesis and a skill set. So over, I mentioned that we've been doing this a long time, and over the last 30, 35 years, we've continued to see owners who want good, solid, monetary valuation as they look to transition, but they also want to do right by their people and their family. And money is important, but as you know, these businesses get to a point where these are successful, typically wealthy families due to perspective, but typically wealthy families where, yes, money is very important, but there's more than that. So a lot of what these deals include is how to get ownership to the next family generation, to the next level of management, and they want help accomplishing initiatives, often major initiatives, before ultimately retiring. And we get a lot of calls from you guys where it's almost like, hey, got a situation with shareholders. They want to retire, but they know that they need to do a deal now. They want to grow their business. They want to buy a competitor. They want to accomplish something before they ultimately hang the boots up. So one can almost back into the type of money that a private equity firm needs given its individual thesis and skill set, right? So as you'll see on the slide here, up in the top right are limited partners. Those are your investors, right? Those are our investors. You're seeing a number of different examples, whether it's pension funds, insurance companies, high net worth individuals, family offices, endowments. This is your source of capital. So when we say we manage $320 million, it's on behalf of these investors. For KLH, we manage money for all of ourselves, which is unique. In addition, about a dozen successful families. They're all entrepreneurs. They're all successful entrepreneurs and business owners, but we manage money for about a dozen families on behalf of ourselves. So that is our capital base, and then we'll use that capital to invest into standalone businesses when we place these investments. So the money itself can be used to accomplish really a myriad of different goals in the context of a deal, right? The proverbial chips off the table, a partner or two who wants to retire, clean up the ownership table. Maybe some are active, maybe some are inactive, or perhaps, and this is typically what I see, is it's a little bit of all that. Some guys are in, some folks are out, some want to be in but are not in. Multiple different shareholders that we need to clean up and streamline. So we regularly work on situations where there are multiple owners. One wants to stay and grow, one is undetermined, and one wants to retire. And these deals are all highly customizable to accomplish all three of those individual shareholders. And it's important to note that the investments made here, or that I'm showing, these three investments, they're completely standalone across our portfolio. Each company remains its own entity. There's no cross-collateralization. There's no centralized accounting. There's no centralized back office. There's no commingled decisions on one company relative to another. However, there was a question asked on the last webinar. There is absolutely an opportunity to introduce these portfolio companies to each other, right? So take, for example, if we were all to invest in a janitorial business, if the other portfolio companies are regionally related or similar or close by, absolutely, we can introduce one to the other to help a company with its janitorial needs, for example. So on the types of money, we chose this type of capital strategically. And when I say type of capital, remember, it's all high net worth dollars as well as our own that we manage, right? So we did this all strategically given our thesis and skill set. We understand these businesses aren't perfect, and they largely were started servicing one customer, and some still have customer concentration, for example. We understand that their team, their people, it's really more than that, right? So we wanted this type of capital in terms of flexibility so that we can be patient, we can make some decisions based on what's best for the business, not necessarily the bottom line, right? And I think the flexibility word is key. And it's fun. It's fun investing with our own capital and owners take us as genuine when we look to provide advice, because we're all writing checks into these things, and it's a different business model than the institutional private equity funds. So across the private equity industry, different groups have different approaches and models. So looking at the maturity of a company, I define that as 5 or more years of making money, again, with a minimum EBITDA. We are, in concept, betting that, you know, if a company's making 5 million of EBITDA this year, we are betting that it will make at least 5 million in the coming year, right? Operational involvement, this is hugely different per private equity firm, and likewise per each company's need. What I mean by that is some of our CEO partners have desired an operational partner, right? Somebody who will physically work in the business on either a daily or weekly or monthly basis, and have a company business card and have their own office within the business, et cetera. And we have some of those in our portfolio. And on the complete opposite page, a lot of these families and CEO partners of ours fundamentally do not want that type of employee, seeing it almost as a boss, right? So we get that, and we play both sides of this fence and have staffed our group accordingly to accommodate those desires. The size of investments, as discussed earlier, we work with companies making about 10 million of revenue and at least $2 million of EBITDA. We'll look about 2 to 10 of EBITDA. And in the world of private equity, we're small. I mean, it sounds unique to be able to say, hey, we manage 320 million bucks and we're small. But I think that's the reality of it in our industry, is that we are doing deals or investments or transactions with companies that are making on average about 10 to 50 million of revenue. And frankly, we wouldn't have it any other way. That's who we've been working with for about 35 years now. The industries of interest, we work on value-added distribution businesses, specialty service businesses, think repair it, fix it, maintain it, inspect it, etc., and manufacturing business models. And there are equity groups out there that focus exclusively in, let's say, healthcare, for example, or technology, for example. We are much more opportunistic because we are situationally driven, right? If it's a recap, if it's a management buyout, if it's a generational transfer, those are the situations that we invest in. The type of company or industry comes second to that. We don't typically look at overly techie businesses or software, but I think in this day and age, it's rare that we're coming across a business that doesn't have technology playing some sort of role in the business, particularly in the distribution industry. And then ownership interests, we will both take a majority or control position greater than 50% ownership. And likewise, we have the flexibility to invest for only 10 or 20 or 30% of the company. It doesn't really matter to us. We will behave and perform, and our value add is just the same, whether we own 15% of a company or 90%. We will never own 100% of a business because we want the management team to own as much as they possibly can. So we won't spend too much time on this. This is a slide deck, or a page rather, that's taken out of our introductory slide deck when we're talking with a business owner for the first time. So when we talk about the, who is KLH, what is KLH, why do we exist, this is a good who, what, when, where type of slide, and it covers much of what we've already done. I show this to you so you can get a feel for what these graphics look like and how we approach conversations with business owners. So as you'll read here, we'd like to buy the circus, but we want to bring in our own people, right? So here we have the classic misconception of value creation and what makes the business, right? And while comical here, we think it's critical to understand that there are different flavors, structures, and personalities in this industry. and we feel like we've done this enough to understand that getting the people part right is 75 or 80% of this, right? And the amount of money or the type of money is just the other 20 or 25%. And one of our CEO partners told me the other day, he said, this is a very interesting business and industry because anyone can write a check, right? But then what? You know, anybody can deliver money, anybody can invest in a company. There are rich guys, there's banks, there's, you know, family offices, private equity, et cetera. Anybody can write a check, but then what? And he made a point that has stuck with us for years, which is it's that last half turn or turn of valuation that actually costs you, right? Because there's a way of looking at this where, you know, we can pay $8, and if somebody else wants to pay $9 or even $20, they need to make that model work, right? And there's an old adage of, you know, you need the business to perform better. And that's just not our style, right? We want to go into these things with breathing room. So good fair market value is what we're chasing here, and backing the current team of people already in the business. So how we do this, right, and how private equity works with companies. So the big idea here is growing the equity value of the business together and harvesting that value together. That is the main goal and objective across really all of private equity. So money, as I've said a number of different times, it's really only part of the solution. You know, these folks in these families, they wouldn't be talking to us. You guys wouldn't call us if it was just money, because plenty of people will loan them money or a bank will loan them money, right? It's we need to address the capital needs, and then what? So you'll note the initiatives here and the relationship between private equity and exit planning, right? Some of these items are projects that you guys are already working on or have frankly accomplished and finished years ago. The family dynamics and the politics at the dinner table, getting your organizational structure or legal entity rationalization cleaned up, focusing on delegation, and simply overall just kind of prepping the business is what we both do in terms of you and us in tandem. So what we typically do is physically facilitate the liquidity event, but that's the easy part, as I've mentioned. We'll work with management to then structure the business properly moving forward, right? Grandkids or kids are in the right position or compensation package. The key salesmen or key sales folks and the operational folks are satisfied, graduate the business from typically QuickBooks to more horsepower, et cetera. These are all things that we do or that I do on a daily basis with these businesses. And oftentimes the business needs more athletes on the team, right? Not necessarily a ball hog, as we call them, but the right athlete to put assists on the board. And a lot of companies struggle with finding good labor given the country's shortage of blue collar talent, right? We struggle with this every day within our portfolio companies. Is there's just a mass shortage of good, skilled, qualified labor. So we source sales folks, operational folks, managerial teams, and accounting professionals if and when these portfolio companies need them. So the adage that I use is almost think real estate, right? We're not, we're increasing the square footage of the house and that price to square foot of the house, right? So maybe they've always wanted to buy another business and put them together, but don't want to risk their own money or reputation because they've never done it before. That's what we're doing, right? That's the types of things that KLH and frankly any private equity group will spend time accomplishing. So let's learn more about the basics or the basic mechanics of a family succession transaction, and most importantly, the benefits to these families. So what is a private equity sponsored family succession transaction, right? Let's define it. So a private equity sponsored family succession transaction is a deal or a transaction where a private equity partner sponsors or partners with the next generation to buy their family business from their parents or retiring or inactive owners. And we will arrange the entire capital package needed to fund the purchase, right, including the equity capital, which comes from our fund that we talked about. The purchase is structured to allocate ownership primarily to the company's new leaders, right, including family and sometimes non-family managers who will be responsible for the company's future success. At our shop here, it's important that substantial ownership, we define that as 10 to 40% of ownership, is in the hands of our partners, the next generation of company leaders, to ensure that all of our interests are aligned. And what are the benefits? Let's look here at the top. The older generation harvests value and diversifies wealth immediately, right? So buying a business, I think this is an important concept. Buying a business is not, unfortunately, as simple as buying a home, with a mortgage, right? It takes significant capital and money. And oftentimes, with the size of the companies and the families that we're working with, it's an amount of money that is often more than, any one single family member, particularly a younger generation, has in their savings account, or can risk in that investment, right? So likewise, finding a bank that'll provide that amount of money is challenging. And we get a lot of calls from teams and family members who say, hey, I want to buy out my family's business, or I want to buy out my aunt or my uncle, etc., but my company's worth, I think, $20 million. The bank's only willing to give me $5 million, depending upon what the company does, and help. So we hear this every day. So while the older generation may be willing to take, say, a seller note or owner paper as a form of payment to complete the transaction, the combination of said personal savings, bank loans, and seller financing may fall short of the company's full value, right? And that's where we come in. And furthermore, the capital structure that proposed deal may inhibit growth during the payoff period if the business is using its cash flow to buy out the older generation instead of investing in growth initiatives. So we'll invest significant equity capital from the fund and arrange the total capital structure that I mentioned that will not burden the company's growth going forward, right? That's our main goal. And our dedicated fund and investment experience allows us to quickly arrange the capital on favorable terms. With our partnership, the goal is for the older generation to monetize their, quote, nest egg, remove all exposure to the company's future performance so that their proceeds are definitive and final, and sets up the next generation for success with an experienced partner and capital structure that is supportive of future performance and growth. It's cash on the barrel, it's immediate cash at close, and we're giving equity out of our pocket to the next generation. So that is mechanically how this is working. Next up, pass the opportunity down for significant wealth creation, right? That is the core thesis of these transactions: is family-owned business, it's worth something. You've got sellers and buyers with the same last name. The sellers or the older generation wants cash at close or would like cash at close, but the younger generation cares about who they have as a partner and how they can set up the business to maximize growth, right? The company stays intact. This is another huge one that we hear about regularly. When one company, as you guys know, sell to another, the cultures and the processes merge and jobs are often affected, right? And in contrast, a private equity sponsored family succession will keep the business intact, and more specifically, quote, in the family, so that it can continue serving its customers, employing the team or its people, and growing in value for future generations to come. And lastly, it's an ongoing partner with access to deep pockets, right? I mean, the goal of our fund is to invest into these businesses. So in a private equity sponsored family succession deal, the company will gain, us or any group as a new partner to help tackle initiatives and the challenges that are going on daily. And we work side by side with management teams, evaluating and prioritizing growth strategies, giving managers confidence in their decisions and investments, right? We're typically viewed as a sounding board. So whether it be implementing software systems, recruiting different level executives, making acquisitions, battling with competition, responding to challenges, these companies now have us as a vested, experienced partner to help share that load. And in fact, once educated on the benefits, the next generation often views our partnership as a way of breaking through barriers and really accomplishing the goal at a greater speed than what they could do on their own. And as partners, our interests are directly aligned, right? I mean, we're going to make money in growing the equity value. And likewise, that next generation is going to make money by growing the equity value. So our successes and our failures are shared. And we all participate in the equity appreciation that we achieve together. So such support may be particularly attractive if the next generation is still growing in their leadership role. You know, they may not be fully ready to take over the business. And we see it every day. And I'm kind of smiling at you guys through the phone here because we see it daily where junior wants to take over. Mom and pop are still a little bit hesitant to that. We're used to that. Access to growth capital, a couple bullets down here. We've mentioned we've got a dedicated fund to support growth equity investments, and our experience gives the lenders that we use greater confidence in the company. So many of the customary constraints, that you guys are dealing with from the lender's perspective, think heavy amortization schedules, growth restrictive covenants or tight covenant packages, and personal guarantees, those are all removed, right? So in other words, as the older generation can cash in their chips without the next generation risking their personal assets to do so. So not only can we help avoid the next generation from immediately putting their personal net worth at risk, but a partner like us can help arrange future growth financing on more favorable terms than the businesses can on their own. And with the right capital structure in place, the company can respond to growth opportunities more quickly. So hitting on addressing estate planning goals, a PE-backed or a private equity-backed family succession deal is highly customizable and can really be tailored to address estate planning goals that minimize the tax implications of a business sale, right? And the transaction is an opportune time to set up trusts or other vehicles for future generations to build wealth in a tax-efficient manner. And having completed over 130 of these, we've got the experience to recommend and establish a structure to achieve your specific goals or the family's specific goals. And lastly here, it allows for reshuffling, right? So as you'll see on the bottom right, this is all about optionality. As you'll look at the pie charts across the bottom, we can do a minority or non-control family succession deal where the next generation continues on in control of the business, right? Owning more than 50%. Or moving one pie chart over to the right, we will cash out more of the older generation, which is more cash on the barrel to them. And that next generation will own, less than 50%. So now is when we will take a pause, and we will give you guys about 4 or 5 minutes to click that link, turn your speakers on, and listen to this case study of a business called Federal Resources up in Stevensville, Maryland. So I'll put the phone on pause, and we will be back in 4 or 5 minutes. Okay, I hope everyone was able to watch that short clip in full. And if not, you certainly now have the link, and that link is also on the KLH Capital website. So let's talk about it. I mean, what you heard is Robbie navigating through the successes and complications of his family-owned business. So I will go through a quick case study on that business so that you have a little bit more context of the deal and of the overall situation. But the long and the short of it is, this is a generational transfer situation where KLH took a majority position to buy out both in-laws, mother-in-law and father-in-law, as well as gift equity to Robbie, and we'll talk about the outcome here. So by background, the company, as you heard, was founded by Pete and Ann, husband and wife, in the late 80s to distribute maritime parts and products to the U.S. Navy. And in 2005, under the direction of the founder's son-in-law, Robbie, the company expanded into a new product category focused, and you heard him say this, it's focused on chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and explosive detection equipment, right? It's quite a mouthful, but the CBRNE sector is what this division focuses on, and that generated significant growth for the business, right? So you had Robbie's division that he was spearheading that was growing rapidly, while his in-laws division that was selling products to the Navy was not flat, but was growing at a much slower growth rate. So by 2011, Robbie's division was generating about $65 million in revenue with healthy EBITDA margins, and needed to increase its credit line from about $7 million to $15 million under its growing inventory. And until then, the founders of the business really had provided their personal guarantees to secure the company's capital resources. However, you guys probably know where I'm going with this, but as they approached the retirement age and became less active in the day-to-day operations, they were no longer comfortable assuming that contingent liability of signing checks and having their social securities on that line of credit. And as you guys know, the key to growing any distribution business is access to capital or liquidity so that you can buy and trade inventory. So the family consulted its advisors about their alternatives, and the exit planner, the consultant, introduced KLH. So the founders in this case study are in Federal. They decided to sell 100% of their ownership to KLH and retire, right? The two in-laws, mother-in-law, father-in-law. And we then became partners with Robbie, the son-in-law, who also was then granted or cut in for his ownership stake. So as soon as the transaction closed, we lined up a $12 million line of credit that eventually and very quickly grew to $32 million within 6 months, frankly, with no personal guarantees. And we also recruited a CFO as well as additional sales professionals and advised the company through the implementation of a new both ERP and CRM system. And then finally, KLH spearheaded the company's first acquisition, a training company called Hazmat IQ, which was a leading provider of specialty hazardous material training services sold to the federal and state and local first responders, which obviously expanded the company's services and diversified its revenue. The thesis there was, if Federal Resources is currently distributing the product, why not teach the actual end users how to use these devices? Because we know if we provide them the education, they'll come back and they'll buy more directly from us. So after 4 years of building the company together, the management team led by Robbie approached us about buying us out, right? It was an interesting move here, but the company was growing so rapidly, and Robbie was young enough and had enough horsepower and talent where he wanted to buy us out. So we guided the team through a successful management buyout of our shares. And we frankly continue to advise the company as a director on its board today. So we don't own any of the equity for Federal, but one of my partners, James, still sits on the company's board of directors to help Robbie and help the business. And we've formed a terrific relationship and a bond here. So in summary, family-owned business experiencing rapid growth. It's a value-added distribution business with increasing capital needs, and the first founding generation was nearing retirement, while you have the second generation coming in with high horsepower wanting to take the company in a slightly different path. So as an investment structure, we provided 100% of the equity and arranged the debt financing. And post-deal, we owned about 60% of the company, and the second generation plus a number of key managers owned the remaining 40%, with the ability to earn significantly more ownership as the company grew, right? So it was structured as a 60-40 deal right out of the gate, where we did originally buy 100% from Pete and Ann, but then gifted 40% away. And then, of course, as I mentioned, after 4 years later, the management team purchased KLH's shares back and now own 100%. So as key takeaways, we provided, or the private equity group provided, the capital required to purchase the business, avoiding the use of seller financing, right? It was 100% cash at close. The older generation received payment up front versus over time. And as a part of the deal, we arranged and expanded the credit facility with no personal guarantees to support the company's growing capital needs. We professionalized and our personal values kind of resonated with the family's values, giving them confidence in their new partnership, right? Because that was a big deal in terms of giving up control to somebody else. They wanted to make sure that they got that right in terms of just how we view the world, which is critical. We brought on in-depth experience, frankly, because we know value-added distribution, right? So just improving the growth and the value profile of the business. And then we funded the internal sale, preserving the company legacy and customer relationships for valued employees. So we'll move on past the case study and get into now how to identify, when an owner or company is a candidate for a family succession. And we should have time afterwards to go through a number of different questions here. So as you see here, there's a certain things to keep in mind on a conscious basis versus subconscious. So things such as you hear, I want to preserve the legacy and culture of my company, or I want to take care of the team and my people. The next generation of my family wants to buy the business from me. Or, I want to buy the business from my mom or dad or uncle or cousin, etc. Last one here, I wouldn't dare consider selling to my competitor, right? It's my family-owned business. We see this all the time, where companies get to a point where the owning generation or the shareholders need fair market value for liquidity and estate planning, but you've got the next generation of family in there who wants to become an owner or wants to own the business and not see the business folded into a competitor, right? And then things to hit on a subconscious level, obviously, I want out of the business. It's time to retire. I want to diversify my net worth and not have all my eggs in this one basket. I want to invest. I don't want to invest any more of my money to continue growing the company. That is what fuels a lot of these businesses when they get up in age and they start to flatten off in terms of a growth trajectory. Is it's just too risky to continue to invest the personal dollars from the family, right? And then lastly, just I need to get rid of the personal guarantees that I have on the capital that's been invested in the business, right? And that chimes into my third point of the liability becomes too much. So all of these deals, whether it's a generational transfer deal or a management buyout deal or just a partial sale, they all have to do with this slide, right? It's diversification of net worth mixed in with how to grow, mixed in with how to properly facilitate a succession plan, right? And remember, the marriage between exit planning and private equity is that we both do these things, right, on different levels and different topics and projects, but we both do this, right? So that is the goal. And as you'll read at the bottom, right, every owner, every company, every family has different goals and objectives. And working with a private equity group is a highly customizable way to accomplish multiple different goals and objectives. These deals, there's multiple different levers we can push and pull to give equity from this person to that person, or maybe it's out of our own pocket. Different structures on valuation. We handle rent and buying real estate differently on a family by family basis. So highly, highly customizable. For those of you who have sat through the SEPA course, this should look familiar. In terms of qualifying for a private equity group and ultimately getting a deal done, we will look at, let's say you call and you say, hey, got a company, let's take a look. We will be evaluating company size, company trends, the customer relationships. Is there contracts? Is there not contracts? Are there purchase orders? Is it recurring revenue? Is it project-based revenue? Is the whole industry growing? And is this company growing faster than the growth of its industry as a whole, or slower? What do the competitors look like? What do the vendors look like? Is there vendor concentration that should pose as a risk? And again, with these family-owned businesses, none of them are perfect, right? We have yet to see or come across a perfect business. I frankly don't think it exists, no matter what the size or ownership is. But these are the top 5 channels, I'll call it, of diligence that we'll spend time evaluating. And then lastly, just understanding when and how to introduce the concept, right? And these are things that you guys are better at than we are, frankly, but it's very simple. So what is the process? Once the purchase price and terms are agreed upon, and we get introduced to generational transfer situations both long before there's ever a conversation about valuation, as well as long after there's been a conversation about valuation. So some of these situations come to us and they say, hey, I want to buy out my father. It's $14 million. Help me arrange for the financing. Likewise, a lot of these conversations start where, hey, I think I may want to buy out my mom or my dad, but my sister's in the business too. I've got a younger brother who wants to become an owner, but he's too young right now. My parents haven't done that. Help me accomplish all of this, right? So once that purchase price and the terms are agreed upon with KLH or with any private equity group being involved, the actual sale or the deal takes roughly 60 to 90 days to close. And the key tasks fall into 3 activities, right? Due diligence, financing, and transaction documentation. And the process begins with due diligence, which involved, as you guys know, engaging third-party advisors to really assess the financial condition, the market dynamics, competitive landscape, and the legal condition of the company. Once that process is complete and we, quote, know everything about the business, we'll approach our trusted lending sources to arrange any new debt financing, lines of credit, et cetera, that need to facilitate the transaction. And then finally, when the lending partner or partners have been selected, the lawyers get to work and the purchase agreement and associated financings are papered and finalized. And again, what are the benefits to the new or to the current owner rather? Immediate full cash at close, right? No seller financing, no seller notes. We're not relying upon the business to pay off any sort of ownership transfer. That's what we handle all up front on day one with the fund that we manage, right? And then obviously the younger generation becomes an owner and has an opportunity to create generational wealth or substantial wealth within their family's business. And lastly, the legacy remains intact. This deal is not selling to a competitor or a strategic competitor, right? We are this goes for any lower middle market private equity group, we are placing a bet and trust on the current team to stick around. And that's commonly mistaken with private equity, is that, we will come in and replace folks. That is a slippery slope. What we do at KLH is we try and find companies with teams that we want to back, right? Qualified, motivated, skilled, talented teams that want to stick around, and we will give them equity out of our own back pockets to inhibit them to be able to do that. So that's the process, and that is a generational transfer case study in full. So why don't I push pause? I am done. That is it, and would love to answer any questions. And you will, I think, either Drew will send out the presentation or I will, and you can certainly have access to the video that's now in your inbox. We have white papers on our website, and likewise, I can email them to you as well, on a family succession deal or structure case study that you can send to your clients. And of course, you can call us anytime. We have a lot of phone calls and conversations with you guys, some with actionable opportunities, some just in concept. But we're happy to be a resource and a friend to you guys. So that's all I've got. So why don't I stop, and Drew, we can field questions if possible, and if not, I appreciate the time.
Yeah, absolutely, Kyle. Thank you. We actually had a few questions come in throughout, so I wanted to hold off until now. So first question that came in for you is, in structuring deals given, you are allowing management to keep equity. How much of your investment is direct cash equity versus using leverage or debt to make the investment?
Yeah, good question. It totally depends upon the balance sheet needs and the business model, and what the goal and objective is. Like, for example, if the company or if that management team says, hey, we can grow next year 25% if we had $2 million of cash on the balance sheet, right? And these are real things that we hear all the time. So it totally depends, but on average, we'll do 50-50 debt to equity, and that's on average. Some transactions that we've done have been 100% equity, and then some of them have been kind of 60-40 debt to equity, just depending upon how we can generate the returns that we need, and likewise how to structure the balance sheet in a most favorable manner for performance. But on average, think 50-50 debt to equity on the buy.
Perfect. Second question. If we have reported an OBA for another business that we have opened and it was approved, do we need to report the various services offered under the new OBA?
What is an OBA?
I guess I do not have the answer for you.
If we can get that answer, I can tell you more. Or if we don't have time to get that answer, shoot me an email. Whoever that was that has that question, shoot me an email or give a call, and be happy to chat about it.
Perfect. All right, so then moving down. How does selling away apply to a financial planning relationship where the client has paid the advisor a planning fee for an investment recommendation on their outside accounts?
Read that again, Drew.
Yeah. How does selling away apply to a financial planning relationship where the client has paid the advisor a planning fee for an investment recommendation on their outside accounts?
So I ultimately don't fully understand the question. However, if the client has paid you as an advisor to provide investment advice, I don't fully understand the question, but that's its own standalone transaction, right? That's your deal with the family or with the seller. We do, and I don't know if this was the question, but we do pay referral fees to folks, obviously, who can accept referral fees, for introductions. And again, I don't know if that's where the question was going or not, but we do pay referral fees for these introductions. And they typically start at about $200,000. I think the largest one that we've paid is a little bit over $1 million. So they get lucrative. But if that does not answer that question, please do shoot me a note or give a call, because I'm happy to walk through that question if I didn't answer it.
Perfect. And then final question for you that came through. Do you ever come into a quote unquote discount company and turn it around?
Rarely. I'm coincidentally, I'm working on one right now where it's exactly that. It's a great brand. It's a well-known brand. The family unfortunately had a death. The next generation had to slide into management. They call it 80% prepared, but the company is no longer growing at the rate that it was. So we're not turnaround folks. That's not what we do. That's not what we've been paid by our investors to do and invest in. But when we do come into something where it's either a balance sheet problem or it's a great brand, good business, but that just needs a little bit of easygoing fixing up, we'll look at that. But in general, we're not turnaround guys. I know of a couple groups that are experts at doing that, but no, that's not part of our core interest.
Perfect. Well, those are the questions that came through. If anyone has additional questions they'd like to take offline, obviously on your screen there you see Kyle's contact information. You could reach out to him, or I'd be more than happy to field questions and get those over to Kyle if you just want to shoot those over to me as well. But with that, we can go ahead and start wrapping up the call today. Kyle, thank you very much for spending some time with us. Is there anything else you would like to add before we conclude today?
No. I don't think so. I think the only thing that I'm thinking about, and Drew, correct me with the date, but there's a webinar that you guys are holding. It's the minority or non-control webinar, which should be pretty good. I think it's maybe August 28th. It's coming up. I'm flipping through my notes here, but there will be Tuesday, August 28th. There's another webinar featuring minority investing, right? So less than 50%, which should be pretty good, and that's something that we do as well. So if you didn't know about that webinar, make sure to tune into that as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Kyle. And kind of touching on that as well, our kind of for the Exit Planning Institute folks, the summit in Nashville is coming up at the end of September. If you're not registered and you want some more additional information on that, please visit exitplanningconference.com, or you can reach out to myself here at EPI Global. I'll be more than happy to share kind of what we got cooking for that conference, which we're really excited about. And we're about, I think it's 38 days away now, so we're kind of getting ready and ramped up for that as well. But like I said earlier, the webinar today was recorded, so I will send that out to everybody later today. And then again, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to Kyle or myself. I'll be more than happy to field those questions for you. But with that, we'll go ahead and conclude. Kyle, again, thank you very much for spending some time with us today. I know I'll see you soon, but if there's anything we could do for anyone in attendance, please let us know. And everyone have a good rest of the day, and we'll all catch up soon. Thank you very much.